Beyond Midnight, John Coltrane here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Juan?
Well, gay rights groups around the world are praising the United States for lifting a 22-year ban that barred foreigners who have HIV from legally entering the country without an official waiver. HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. The ban covered both visiting tourists and foreigners seeking to live here. President Obama announced the ban would be lifted in October, but the rules didn't change until this week.
22 years ago, in a decision rooted in fear rather than fact, the United States instituted a travel ban on entry into the country for people living with HIV/AIDS. Now, we talk about reducing the stigma of this disease, yet we've treated a visitor living with it as a threat. We lead the world when it comes to helping stem the AIDS pandemic, yet we are one of only a dozen countries that still bar people from HIV from entering our own country. If we want to be the global leader in combating HIV/AIDS, we need to act like it.
The United States was one of only about a dozen countries that barred people who have HIV. In 1989, the U.S. ban made international headlines when a Dutch AIDS educator named Hans Paul Verhoef attempted to travel to a gay and lesbian conference in San Francisco. He was detained in Minnesota and jailed for 4 days after the AIDS drug AZT was found in his luggage.
On Thursday, another Dutchman, Clemens Ruland, became one of the first known HIV-positive people to legally visit the United States since the travel ban was lifted. On Thursday afternoon, he flew into New York's JFK International Airport with his partner, Hugo Bausch, who is HIV negative. Clemens Ruland was diagnosed with HIV in '97 after being infected by an ex-lover in New York. Under the travel ban, he's been barred from returning to New York until now. Well, Clemens Ruland and Hugo Bausch join us now in the studio here in New York, along with Boris Dittrich, Advocacy Director of the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Rights Program at Human Rights Watch. We welcome you all, and welcome to New York.
Thank you.
It has been quite a journey for you. Talk about what the trip was like last night.
Well, the trip was very exciting. Even already at the Schiphol airport in Amsterdam, it was busy with the press, and we had a perfect flight over here, and then a lot of attention when we arrived at the airport and were welcomed by Boris Dittrich and the Dutch consul.
Were you asked questions when you came to JFK?
Yeah, we gave interviews at the airport.
Were you asked questions by customs officials?
No, it actually went the same way like I was used to in all the other times in the past that I flew into the US. So in that sense, it was no difference. It was a difference for me because it felt totally different. In the past, for example, 5 years ago when I flew in, I had to lie, like thousands of other people, lie about my HIV status to be able to visit friends and here in New York.
Where had they asked you about your HIV status that you had to lie?
Well, they don't ask you, but because I'm depending on my medication, I have to carry it with me. And to get it safe into the country, I always carried it in my hand luggage. So it means if they check you at customs, they might find your medication, and in that way they find out you're HIV positive.
And Boris Dittrich, how often did the U.S. government, the cases where the ban was actually exercised or imposed on travelers coming into the United States?
Well, actually, on a yearly basis, we know about cases of people who have been arrested and sent back to the country of origin because, for instance, in the hand luggage, officers found some medication. And nowadays, you need to apply for a visa to the United States 72 hours in advance in your home country. And in the questionnaire, there were questions about, do you have HIV as disease? And if you filled in yes, then already your access was denied. So a lot of people who were honest about their status were denied access to the U.S.
Talk about the struggle in this country to have this policy, the ban, lifted. Boris.
Well, Human Rights Watch and a lot of other groups were campaigning against this ban for years and years because we know that in other countries there was no ban, and even WHO and UNAIDS and all kind of international medical standards said it's ridiculous to have a ban because it is actually a fake protection, because people go underground, you give a stigma, you discriminate people living with HIV, and because they are not honest then when they want to enter the US, it gives such a negative approach that people don't want to be tested, for instance. So actually it's counterproductive, and this has been proved in many reports, but the US government didn't want to change until President Bush decided to change it. And then of course President Obama finished the job recently.
And what are some of the other countries that still have a ban?
Well, the good news is that, for instance, South Korea also lifted the ban. They were also persuaded by all the data and facts. But the Russian Federation, for instance, is a country that still bars people who are living with HIV to enter the country. And you get ridiculous situations. For instance, I was invited to attend an HIV/AIDS meeting in Moscow, and people who wanted to talk about what it is like to live with HIV were not allowed into Russia to talk about it. Well, the Russian government was supporting this meeting. So, of course, you can sometimes get a waiver, but it's very unclear, and it would be a good idea if Russia also would lift the HIV ban.
Hugo Bausch, you traveled with your partner Ruland. You're HIV negative. What
Yes.
did this feel like for you coming into this country? This, we believe, is the first time someone has legally come into the country since the ban was lifted earlier this week.
Well, it was much more relaxed to travel to the States because 5 years ago I was more excited than Clemens because he is living with HIV, and so he's used to having all these questions and having to deal with it. But to me it was well, of course, I traveled with him, and I experienced also a lot of anxiety because it could mean that we would be sent back the same day if he was discovered.
Clemens, you won an essay. This is why your trip was sponsored.
Yeah.
What was the essay?
Well, we actually won it by his cartoon. Hugo made a cartoon. He's an illustrator. He made a cartoon, and together we made a little poet what comes to it. And in that poet, it refers back to the fact that I got infected here, and actually that I turn my face now to the US, and that I love to come in here is the way as I am, HIV positive, and that I'm more than just a virus. I'm just a normal person like everybody else, and you don't have to be afraid for people with HIV and AIDS.
And Hugo, the illustration, what were you illustrating?
I was illustrating someone flying in alongside the Statue of Liberty, which was welcoming him. Hey buddy, welcome to the US, while he was sitting in his small plane pointing towards New York City.
And what are your plans this weekend?
First we go to MoMA.
To the Museum of Modern Art?
Yes.
And you're going to spend some money here in New
Yeah,
York.
too.
We shop till we drop. We came with one suitcase, we're going to leave with at least two.
So you see, it's good for economy as well, that people living with HIV can enter the country.
And your sense, having spent time both here in the United States and in Europe, as the progress in the United States in terms of public opinion, in terms of being able to adequately accept and deal with people with HIV?
I think this will support the HIV organizations here a lot. That the exchange between people will get more and better. So I think this is for the best of everybody. Sorry.
Boris, you mentioned earlier that it was actually begun under Bush, the attempt to lift this ban,
Yes.
removing it from a list of diseases that would be banned. Does that surprise you? And why was President Bush the one who was doing this?
Well, he was the one doing this because there was so much proof that it was actually a counterproductive measure, and that it was only discriminatory and stigmatizing. There have been a lot of international agencies, like I told you, UNH, WHO, who said this doesn't serve any purpose. It's against international human rights standards. So I guess the Bush administration was persuaded to do it, and also because other countries had already lifted their ban.